Welcome back to the Midwifery Wisdom Podcast. This week, we are joined by our lovely co-host, Augustine, as she talks with one of our own Midwifery Wisdom team members and course instructor, Melissa Nealy. Melissa is the instructor for our course, Advanced Evaluation of Lactation and Oral Function Postpartum. And trust me, if you haven't taken the course yet, nothing will be stopping you after hearing the incredible discussion both Augustine and Melissa have in this episode. In this episode, Melissa shares her personal journey with tongue tie, including a botched revision at the age of 18 and another revision, spoiler alert, this one worked, in her 30s. She shares how she went from being a total unbeliever that tongue ties were even a thing to now being the go-to expert teaching a comprehensive course on the subject. You're going to get a little sneak peek into the course content in this episode. Melissa will share an intro on the history of tongue ties, some of the physical and mental impacts of tongue ties, and so much more. Okay, I'll stop talking. I'm so excited for you to hear this incredible episode. Let's dive in.
Well, hi, and welcome back to the Midwifery Wisdom Podcast. And I'm so excited to be joined by my friend and my colleague and a previous past little bit of a student, Melissa.
So happy to be here.
Melissa is in a little bit south of Houston, Texas, and she is a longtime lactation consultant and a fairly new midwife, experiencing all the joys of the first year of practice, which is as many shoulder dystocias in a row as you can experience. Am I right? It's been the pattern I've seen happen before.
Yeah.
But more than that, Melissa is one of our educators, and she is the author of one of our courses. And it's a course that I think should be required viewing for all midwives. And I think we need to tell more people about it, which is why this is happening today. So if you're one of our podcast listeners and you like to see courses from us, this is one that should be on your list. Melissa, tell us the title of your course, and then we're going to jump into how you got into this world, because it's a very interesting, randomly political space, and I want to hear all about it.
I was like, oh crud, what is the name of my course? Advanced Evaluation of Breastfeeding Difficulties? Maybe? I remember the advanced evaluation part.
It is Advanced Evaluation of Lactation and Oral Function, my dear. Lactation and Oral Function.
That is much better. Okay, good. I was like, what was the last part?
It is an advanced deep dive into what I think has been a really neglected part of breastfeeding education. So we talk a lot about the mouth that attaches to the breast, this oral function piece. And this is the subject that you have become a literal expert on. How did you get interested? How did you get interested in looking at the other piece of this equation?
So some of it is luck, because I had a tongue tie to the tip of my tongue, and I was an opera singer. And I had a vocal teacher who was absolutely convinced that the reason I could not roll my R's was because I had a tongue tie. Now, there was another teacher who was like, BS, if she'd been born in Mexico, she'd have freaking figured it out. What I wish they had known was that a lot of the vocal production issues I was having were in fact related to tongue tie. And so I knew when I was 18 that I had a tongue tie, that it was somehow affecting my phonation, my ability to sing and speak and exist. And I went to my mom and was like, I want to be an opera singer and I need to fix this. And there was a dentist who worked in the same building as her. And she had me go one afternoon after school, and he sort of it was so traumatic. It was bad. There was no anesthesia. There was no topical. He clipped the anterior portion of my tongue tie. It hurt like a mofo. I was given no exercises. Just this is so silly that I'm doing this for your mom. Whatever. And then I went on about my way, thinking it was fixed. And then when I had my daughter, and I was super reading all the books, every book you could find, And it was like, and tongue tie can affect breastfeeding. And I was like, well, crap, I had a tongue tie. I wonder if my kid's going to have a tongue tie. And so when I asked this cute pediatric resident who looked like he was 12, hey, does my daughter have a tongue tie? He glanced in her mouth and was like, no. She had a completely anterior tongue tie all the way to the tip of her tongue. We breastfed with so many issues, so many issues. I had mastitis 20 times in the first year of lactation. And so
Oh my
I
God,
learned
that's horrible.
it was awful. So I learned all the things about tongue tie, not necessarily then, because I was part of La Leche League and I was being told, well, some babies are just like that. Sometimes they do need to nurse every hour. Yeah, you just need to kind of suck it up. You're a first time mom. You don't really know what you're talking about. There was a lot of kind of brushing off and dismissing. And so I started doing research about everything I could possibly do. So pediatric resident had no idea what was going on. And I learned through the hard way of all the things that can go wrong with the tongue tie. And then when my daughter was born, I had a midwife who was like, hey, did you know she has a tongue tie? But don't do anything about it because it's really traumatic. And so I investigated, I looked for things. I also had some serious postpartum mood disorders going on and anxiety, and could not.
But that might have even been confirmed by your own experience of it being traumatic and painful.
Mm-hmm. And then when my son was born, similar, the midwife was like, hey, did you know he has like every tie you can have? Lips, cheeks, tongue. There's this really cool place called Kidstown, which I ended up working for. And you should consider that. And I, again, postpartum mood disorders, the idea of going somewhere I was unfamiliar with was terrible. It was not an option actually for me. And so I had her clip the anterior portion and was like, it feels fine now. Great. We still went on to have tons of issues. But at that same time, I was doing my deep dive into why does everybody say tongue tie is a thing? Like, I don't understand it. I'm a lactation consultant. I don't understand. I've done La Leche League. This is, everybody talks about tongue tie. I'm so sick of it. I'm going to figure out why these people are saying you got to do exercises, because as a new mom, ain't nobody got time for that. And why do you have to do this? And why do you have to do that? And why are we doing surgery? And why are we recommending body work? What the hell? This is so much time and money, and it's ridiculous. And then
and especially those of us who are like midwife purists, and we're like, the body is miraculous and it's made the way it's made and it works, right? Like definitely, it's really hard to get on board with what I have come to realize is the reality and the truth. And I think you have too, but it's really hard. It like smacks a bunch of your core beliefs right in the face.
Yes. Super does. And at that time I was Catholic, and like, God made our body this way and this is how it's supposed to be. And if God made my child this way, this is what was intended. And so it was serious core beliefs.
It's rough.
Why would
it's rough.
Do something to my child that's going to cause them pain when I just worked real hard to have that beautiful home birth? And we didn't do this, and
to
this.
Avoid the pain. Yeah.
And so like, it was hard. And then to come full circle and be like, oh no, this is a thing. And not only is this a thing, I can stand here and go, I am the poster child for adult tongue tie, and go, oh my God, I need to address my tongue tie, addressing my older children, because then by the time I got fully convinced, I think my kids were 6, 4, and 2. And then it took us a year to prep, and all of us had it done. So they were 7, 5, 3, and I was 36. And so
wow. Well, I want to hear all those stories, but first, before we go into that, I want to go back to like what finally convinced you. Like, how did you turn this corner from being confronting your core beliefs to being like, the evidence makes sense, I see it now?
I think the mountain of research that I was being presented with, because I was going to, okay, there's a woman named Suzanne Jewell. She's amazing. She owns Bayou City Breastfeeding, which as far as I know is the largest group of lactation consultants, at least in Texas, if not the country. And she was a friend of mine. I went to her, I was like, Why? What are you doing? Like, and I was kind of confrontational and was like, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't understand why you're doing it. Tell me why. And instead of telling me why,
surgery in newborns babies' mouths is intense.
Yeah.
And
she did the best thing possible.
So what'd she say? What'd she do?
She said, I need you to go look at Dr. Zaghi. I need you to go look at Dr. Gahiri. I need you to go look at all of these studies. I need you to go read this book and this book and this book, and then we can talk. Which is kind of what I tell my moms to do when like grandma's naysaying home birth. And I'm like, no. They can't get on the same page of you until they have the same information as you. So tell them to go read this book. When they've read that book, you can have the conversation. And so she gave me this list of things to go read.
What
and
book
I
is
was
that for childbirth, by the way?
Oh gosh, that depends.
What book is
I
that
think
for
it's
childbirth?
Come
on, tell me. What do you recommend? I'm really curious.
At the time, it was Ina May. Now now I don't know. So one of my clients recommended me this tome called like How to Have a Natural Birth, and it's like 700 something pages. And I was like, that might be a little much for grandma to read.
Yeah. What about home delivery is not just for pizza? What about that book?
Oh,
like
yeah. That's a really good one. I like that one. There's another one called Why Home Birth. That's another one.
Yeah, that was
that's a
documentary too.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we digress. Sorry. So you went on this research. We're going to do that, by the way. Note to listeners. You have two of the most neurodiverse from Midwifery Wisdom in the same room. Watch out. Okay, so what you read all this research, and can you remember what little nugget or where the point was where the switch flipped for you? Was it like about breastfeeding function, mother pain, digestion, central nervous system function, immune system? Like there's so many reasons, right? But like, what was it that like flipped this switch for you?
The connection to ADHD and sleep.
Oh, God, that's a good one. Okay. So what did you learn in this particular lane?
So it was that, okay, if you have a tongue tie, your tongue is tethered to the floor of your mouth. What you're supposed to do is suction the tongue to the roof of your mouth when you're at rest, including when you're asleep. And I know I'm a mouth breather. I have multiple pictures of me with my kids with my mouth gaping open.
While you're asleep.
While I'm asleep. And then, I even was mouth breathing just to exist, because the longer you fail to suction your tongue to the roof of your mouth, you're actually changing the shape of your sinuses. And so for years I have done this. Therefore, it was literally shrinking my nasal airway. So the capacity to get enough air in through my nose truly was not there yet. And you have to build it back up. So my tongue
reducing.
Yes. So my tongue suction to the roof of my mouth was not happening. And what happens is, because it's tethered to the floor, as you're sleeping, it falls back over your airway. You're relaxed. And so I know a lot about oral structures because of my time as an opera singer. And so when the tongue is falling over the airway, you're having mild sleep apnea. And therefore, mild sleep apnea looks like symptoms
or
of
significant.
ADHD. Yeah.
And so
at the time, I was
symptom of ADHD include mild memory loss, ineffective energy patterns, mood changes, sleepiness in the daytime, alertness in the nighttime, concentration problems. I mean, keep going, right? Like these are symptoms of ADHD, and they can absolutely be related to chronic sleep deprivation.
There's so much there. And like looking at, I always joked about, oh, I have ADHD. Like I never received a formal diagnosis. I just joked when I was incredibly forgetful and didn't get things done and procrastinated and all these things. And then looking at, okay, no, I absolutely need caffeine to function. I can drink caffeine at the time. Now I can't. But at the time, I could drink caffeine at 7 p.m. and fall asleep at 8. Like there was no issue with that. Was helping me focus.
Stimulant.
It was not stimulating me to stay awake. That was the only reason I could focus. And there were other things at play at the time, didn't know then what I know now about ferritin. Thank you, Augustine. But like,
just only had to almost die to get that information. So you're welcome.
I know, girl. I know. But yeah, there's so much that mimics, mental fog, brain fog, postpartum. Oh, well, you're just a mom. Yeah, of course you're forgetful. You have mom brain. Oh, you have pregnancy brain. And I was like, but these are
explaining away all the symptoms. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I was going to say, like, the next piece of the puzzle that I want to unravel, like, I want to hear the story of the revision, because I think that's really fascinating, and especially the before and after. But I also, in my own research, have really discovered this link between ADHD and neurodiversity and connective tissue disorders, which I think is really interesting, given the frenulum being a part of the myofascial network. Tell me more about this research. Yeah.
And the midline
defects and all that.
Okay. So there's a really, let me tell you all the books you should read. There's a lovely book, and she has several books. It's specifically, she's looking at retained reflexes and talking about that, reintegration is often this midline aspect. And there are the fascial. Okay, so let's talk about fascia. I think fascia is the coolest organ in the body. And when I use the word fascia, I'm specifically talking about the spider webby, super strong connective tissue that runs everywhere. It's ubiquitous. There's no beginning, there's no end. It is the shaper of the body. It keeps every single thing where it's supposed to be. And there is lots of research that a tongue tie is an extra, it's like a snag in your stockings. It's a bunched up, held fold of fascia. And the problem with the fascial network is that if you have a bunched up, held spot, that literally translates all over your body. So if you have a bunched up, held spot in your tongue, that means you might be the toe walker when you're a baby, because it literally pulls everything towards your tongue. So you're walking around on tiptoes. It makes you more likely to have reflux. It makes you more likely to have decreased skull growth, because your skull is literally not expanding as much as it would because it's held on your tongue. It means your jaw is not growing forward and out because it's held backwards by that fascial network. So you have the recessed jaw, you have overbite, underbite, crossbite, all of those things. You have tension, you can have TMJ dysfunction, you can have that cartilage aspect, you can have it literally holding your entire fascia kind of captive because it can't stretch and move the way that it should. So it actually keeps your shoulders up around your ears.
And because it's on the front, because it's on the front, it also affects your rib cage and your respiration.
It's ridiculous.
And we know statistically that midline defects are on the rise. Defects are on the rise because of environmental exposure, environmental poisons, water pollutants, air pollutants, endocrine disruptors. After Fukushima, all of the babies born on the west coast of the United States had a 300% increased risk of thyroid disorders, right? We know that environmental toxins change the biology of the environment. They also change our environment. And so this is part of, is looking not just at this baby's tongue tie, but all babies in this environment. Yes. Why is it different now than before? So keep going.
Yeah. And to that aspect, I think that's the harder thing for me, because it's frustrating, right? Because if you talk to a midwife who's been a midwife for 30, 40 years, they're like, we didn't see this. This was not a thing. This is the disease du jour. Okay, well, it's been the disease du jour for the past 15 years. So, I like the Weston A. Price. I don't like all of his stuff, but Weston A. Price really gets into, this is a issue with Western diet. Within one generation of introducing a soft food Western diet, you have decreased jaw space. You don't have room for your molars. You don't have room, compressed palate. And that's also part of that tongue tie, the tongue not suctioning to the roof of the mouth. It's supposed to pull the palate down and out, with the suction, because remember, muscles move bones. Just because your palate and skull are, very hard and we think of them as immobile, they're not immobile, and especially not in an infant. And the other issue is we're talking about tongue tie and thinking it just happened. The baby just got here. No. Let's think about embryology. That baby has had a tongue tie since 6 to 13 weeks of pregnancy, because that's when the tongue is differentiating from the floor of the mouth. That's when the palate is forming. By 13 weeks, we have a palate. If the tongue is not suctioning at that point, we're talking about 8 months of a baby who is not ossified, who should be pulling that palate down and out and creating this broad, wide palate, not this tall, narrow, like my face. Anybody who's ever seen a picture of me, I have a tall, skinny face. You can literally feel my skull come to like a point. It's not quite the cone heads, but like it comes to this elevated point and my palate is mimicking it. It's this like mirror image. So,
well, it's just like rocks and water, right? Rocks are immobile until they have enough passage of water. And then the erosion process, the change process happens. And so the same thing is happening with the soft structures of the mouth against the harder palate structures. It's really fascinating. And I think this is such a perfect example of how so much of medicine, and sometimes by default midwifery, is missing the holistic picture, right?
Yes.
There's talk about
nutrient.
There's so much of the techniques. Yeah, then we could go into there's so many pathways, but there's so much talk about like technique, right? Or clinical skill. But if you don't extrapolate technique and clinical skill into the physiology of that person's body, the energy of the couple, the drama of the family, the ecology of the environment, like we are these multi-layered situations, multi-layered organizations. And this is what I really respect about what you've done for this particular topic. And we could do this, in everything. And this is something else Nicole Morales does in much of her education, right? Is really looking at the zooming out. It's not just the whole, it's the whole, right? Her famous quote.
Yes.
And I really love this, what you're doing in the opposite direction. You're up here. And it's really profound, thinking about zooming out to all of these layers that influence that one baby's and dyad's relationship.
Ooh, you have heard some juicy goodness so far. The impact of tongue tie on the body for the baby and mother, a small intro into fascia, and there is so much more goodness coming, including Melissa's personal experience of having a revision done as an adult. But we could not continue on without giving another shout out to Melissa's course, Advanced Evaluation of Lactation and Oral Function Postpartum. As Augustine said at the beginning, this is a course all providers should take. You'll dive into the etiology and history of tongue ties, when, why, and how to assess tongue ties, and much more. Melissa is always updating and adding new content as more research and information emerges. Trust me, you don't want to miss this opportunity to further empower yourself with incredible knowledge to help your clients along their postpartum journey.
So let's talk a little bit about what this was like to make the decision to have a revision as an adult. And before we do that, or maybe after, go ahead. You tell this story.
No,
and then I'll ask another question.
Well, I'm also like, but now I want to talk about nutrients.
I'm organizing things in my brain.
Deficiencies and the epigenetic roles, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going on 12 different trains.
That's a whole nother podcast, baby. That's a whole other podcast. We're gonna do it, also, but it's a different convo.
I know. I was like, and that's that incidence of treatment. There's
so much to
unpack. Okay, we'll do a part 2.
So, well, that's why you made a course. Remember, people can take the course from you.
They can take a course. It's not. I guess I want to go back to that original question and come back here. It's not overnight. We're talking about multi-generational impact of soft food and trying to grow food quickly to feed our giant population. And we're talking about what we've had to do to our plants in order to feed a giant population. And I'm not
Well, can I put it,
things.
this is really like, hi, welcome to neurodiversity. I apologize for interrupting you right this second, but I have a little pet peeve. It's not the giant population. It's the corporate industrial food farming practices.
Well, yeah.
We actually have a falling population right now. It's that nobody grows their own food anymore. If we were still in charge of our own ecosystem, there would not be a shortage of food because there's plenty of seeds and there's plenty of ground. It's just that we're not, we're trying to do it at mass scale with profits. That's the problem.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. And so we've got those chemical aspects. We've got not enough nutrients, and it's that farming practices. We don't have enough nutrients in the ground, and we've got plants that grow very quickly. And so they're pulled before they can even absorb what very few nutrients there are. So like, even like I have a pregnant mom, she's like the 4th time mom. And she's like, can I be on too many supplements? You have me on a lot of supplements. I'm like, ooh, that's a whole unpacking, girl. No, the short answer is no. Do you want the long answer? Because the long answer is we do not get enough nutrients in the food that we are getting. Like, unless you grow your own.
You have to be pre 1940 to get enough nutrients from your food.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so when we're not getting enough nutrients, we're not getting that N-acetylcysteine. We've got that MTHFR gene aspect, which also is included with that neurodiverse aspect, with the tissue. We're having trouble methylating, and then we're giving you crappy folic acid that your body can't do anything with, and then it circulates and hangs out.
Well, and that's just one of so many artificially created. Yeah. You're right. You got it. So many things. This is the second podcast, part 2.
I know. Okay. So I thought it would be, oh, so cute. I thought it would be a cure for ADHD. And that was,
I love that about you. I love that for you. I wish that worked for you. I love that. Mm-hmm.
It's very cute.
No judgment at all. Love that.
And I don't. And I was, that was years ago. And, that was very cute, Melissa. Past Melissa, that was cute. I will say, I think the other aspect was the shoulder tension. Sleep? Oh my God, yes. I could tell as they were doing it, because, I'm an adult. It's not fast. It's slower work because now I've got more vasculature that they're, trying not to hit with the laser, because hitting vasculature with a laser is not great. And I could tell which side of the frenulum they were working on because my shoulder would just suddenly drop. And I was like, are you working on the left side? And she's like, yes, stop talking. But it would just be like, all of a sudden my right shoulder would drop like 1/8 of an inch. And I'm like, what? Whoa. And so it's as you're releasing that tension, you're feeling your shoulders drop incrementally. And like when I sat up, I didn't know I could take a breath that deep. I didn't know that my shoulders went that far away from my ears. I didn't know I was capable of that. And then, oh my gosh, sleep ever since has been so much better. Like, and as a midwife, having quality sleep when you get the sleep, very important.
Wow.
So
that's quick. Like just those few changes. And I know there were more you noticed over time, but those like instant change in your physiology. Yeah. How were your symptoms of ADHD? I mean, I know you're pretty open about your neurodiversity and your reality there, like I am. So like how was your relationship with the various quote unquote negative symptoms of ADHD after this procedure?
I tell everyone, I'm like, there are 2 medical things I have done in my life that have vastly changed my ability to focus. One was doing iron infusions, and one was my tongue tie release. Like those 2 things combined, the ability to go do the thing, that initiation step that's difficult for ADHD was so much easier, partly because of rest. The ability to, when I'm hyper focusing, in order to get into hyper focus, like little things will pull you if you're not super into it. The little things might not pull me as easily, or if they did, I could come back to my task and not be so thrown.
How many people with ADHDs symptoms are exacerbated so terribly because of their inability to actually close their mouth and breathe through their nose. Not to mention the nitric acid that's produced when you breathe through your nose. Like, there's so many levels to this.
I know.
But it just makes my heart break, right?
I know.
It just makes my heart break.
I know. Because it is.
And partly for myself. As you know, I'm headed this way myself.
Yay!
So now, I know, right? Now might be a good time. So I challenge you to, well, first I'm going to show what a frenulum is.
That's I forgot how yours was. Dang, girl. Oh.
So you're supposed to be able to stick your tongue out of your mouth.
Well, you got over your lower lip. You
I can't go any further than my lips.
But
it's barely.
You can see the tip start to curl under your lip
because it's tied. You're supposed to be able to touch the tongue to the roof of your mouth and open your mouth.
So, okay, let's take that a step further. You're supposed to suction it. So, like, if you make a sound and then you feel that pressure, you're gonna suction your tongue. Oh, girl. You're gonna suction your tongue to the roof of your mouth. Oh, we need to publish the video too.
Now it's your turn. So you do the exercises that I just did and show the difference. Yep. Stick your tongue out.
And I just went and saw the chiropractor.
I'm guessing you didn't used to have that range of movement, huh?
Oh gosh, no. In my course, there's actually a side-by-side picture. I probably should put trigger warning of pre and post. And I literally, like, I'm almost gotten 50% more of being able to drop your jaw, because when you suction your tongue, you should be able to, first of all, if you suction your tongue to the roof of your mouth, you shouldn't be able to breathe through your mouth at that point. It should close off the lower airway. You should only be able to breathe through your nose. But my favorite was doing that test and being like, I can still breathe. That's silly, because I had my tongue tie fixed. And like one of my colleagues being like, no, baby, I see it. You didn't fix it. And then and you also, when you do that, you should be able to stretch your jaw to 75 to 90% of your full range of motion from dropping your jaw. So if you just drop your jaw, some people already have so much tension built up that they actually can't even open their mouth very wide. And so that actually is a flag. Yeah, like that. Yeah, because your jaw prevents it, because everything's held. So you just can't open it. I could open my jaw really wide, but you asked me to put my tongue to the roof of my mouth and then drop my jaw. I had almost no range of motion. And then after the tongue tie release, I can stretch it to at least 90% of my full range of motion of my jaw. And that's where I'm like, as a singer, you're supposed to be able to drop your jaw and in order to project and keep your tongue forward without your larynx coming up. Well, with the fascia being super tight, if your tongue is forward, which you have to have a bright sound that will reach the back of an auditorium, your larynx will come up because your tongue and your larynx are connected. Your jaw cannot open fully when you're trying to move your tongue forward, because you've got all this tension.
Sound.
And that was the number one thing for years and years. They're like, oh, you're just not using your breath right. I actually, I was going to collaborate, and it fell apart, with a professor of vocal pedagogy. And we were going to write a paper together and put it out there, because I think this is myths in opera.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, in so many places. Well, so the other thing is about the range of movement, like you were saying. You're supposed to be able to look at the ceiling.
How's that going for you? Look, you can see the tension there. Oh my God.
Stop. I can't do it. I can't look up. Yeah. Oh my God. Turn to the side. Do it again.
Like, you're supposed to, and that's another issue.
You're supposed to have a straight line
out of the base of the skull.
Okay.
Yeah. No, you can't. It's held. And the number of times you see a baby in tummy time that's like pushing up, but like can't lift out of the base of their skull, and they're turning from side to side, but they're looking at the ground and they can't look up at the caregiver. And that to me that can be tension, but it can also be a tie that is unreleased, because they literally can't, because it's being held and they can't look up.
Yeah.
It changes eye function.
Yeah. Yeah, I've oftentimes thought about this in relation. Sure, I've thought about it in relation to Sid's death. So before we turned babies to sleep on their back, those babies that were on their stomach, they didn't suffocate from the blankets. They suffocated from the fact that they're literally tied down without the musculature to get out of the way.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Yes. I have a whole thing. Okay, so I like Outlander.
It's such a pervasive issue. Yeah.
It's so big.
Yeah.
It's so big. Go to the mall. Go to the mall and watch
more.
kids walk around.
Yeah.
And it's all mouth breathing.
There's so many levels to this. I mean, and when you start researching it, you just like drop down a hole.
Yeah, it's a big hole.
Like rabbit
hole.
Deep
hole.
Can't. But it's small. It's actually reduced. No, but it's like it just leads you into like more and more and more topics, right? Like, and then the health of the soil impacts our babies' faces.
And then let's take that to the next level. Let's talk as midwives. A mom with a tongue tie is more likely to have high blood pressure and preeclampsia because she's not freaking getting that freaking oxygen. So like tongue tie can affect high blood pressure and preeclampsia. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And we're talking about multiple generations now. And I am very, very grateful. Like I'm grateful for bottles because I would not exist. Because apparently I tore up my mama's nipples.
Same.
So bottles enabled me to exist.
This was not great for latching. Same.
No. I remember when my son latched, and I had nursed my middle child who I had a known tongue tie, and I didn't realize I had been latching in pain for 2 years.
Wow.
And like because it at low level registers, you're like, yeah, whatever. At this point, I'm just used to it. But when a mom says that to me, they're like, oh yeah, I nursed my toddler. This isn't really registering. I'm like, ooh, put a pin in that. We're going to come back and look at that baby a little bit closer. I just had a mom that was my lactation client turned midwifery client. And when she said that, I was like, we're going to recheck your baby after they've seen the chiropractor because I just want to be real sure. So, and tongue function, because there's this whole other piece of like, I just want tongue function. I don't particularly care how I get it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a frenotomy. It a lot of times is a frenotomy. But sometimes I can get there with exercise and doing chiropractic alone. And a lot of times I can't. A lot of times we do need that surgical aspect because this is not how we were meant to be created. This is pathological. And this is environmental pathology. Yeah. Ooh, I'm really proud of myself.
Robin Lim talks. It was brilliant. Robin Lim talks a lot about the pathology of the placenta because of the environmental changes that we're facing. And of course, the placenta also forms off the midline.
Yep.
And there's the thyroid evidence after Fukushima in the West Coast. And like, I'm just wondering, like, how much more evidence do you think we need as a society before we start paying attention to how the environment that we're creating? Like,
Girl, I keep hoping and hoping and hoping. And
what is the percentage of babies that you think have it? What is the percentage of babies you think that have a tongue tie?
Okay, so I'm going to put out there that I'm biased, and this is actually a whole, I think, 15 minutes of my course, and I'm going to pare it down. As a lactation consultant, no one is paying me to come unless it's not working. So it feels like every baby has this. As a midwife working with clients, a lot of times I can make breastfeeding work, but we're doing it in spite of oral function. Not because we have good oral function, but we're doing it in spite of oral function. So there is not we don't have any studies. The problem is we don't have studies. So we have one from the 90s saying 1% to 3%. And then we have clinicians who are working with this population who, like, you're probably only going to see them if you know that they know stuff about tongue tie, where they're saying it's 33 to 50%. I will say that in my own practice and in the practice I worked in the last 2 years, I have not encountered but 2 babies that I will absolutely swear on a stack of Bibles does not have an issue.
I think regardless of the actual percentage, that's the trajectory, right? So when I started 25 years ago, there were some, like, I remember reading about it, seeing it, you know, I knew I had one, so I could kind of look for that. I didn't know the exam process like I do now, but like 25 years ago, I was like, I see that thing in there, you're probably in trouble right there. You know, and we all read the stories about the midwives who like sharpened their nails and like did it with their nails and stuff. You know, like I was aware, but I wasn't investigating it. Then maybe 15 years ago, when I was in an active, busy practice of my own, I started really paying attention to my own clients as opposed to apprenticeships or lactation or doula clients or whatever. But now I have my own busy practice and I'm paying attention to my own clients, and I'm seeing the cause and effect because I'm seeing them for all their postpartums. And we have bleeding nipples and we have hysterical moms and we have failure to thrive babies, and like something's not working, right? And so I started to be like, if we just got rid of this frenulum, maybe things would go better. And so we like called the pediatrician. Fuck no. We called the EMT guys and we're like, no, we used to do that. We don't do that anymore. And then we'd call the dentist and they'd be like, no, that I'm not qualified. That you have to go to the pediatrician. Like there was like nobody there. So I talked to some IBCLCs and they were just like, oh, you need a nipple shield, right? Like this is
we can work around it. We can work
and so,
around it.
Yeah. And I think that was the solution that busy IBCLDs had come up with. Like we use these crutches to get the baby's mouth big enough that eventually mom stops being in pain. And like, that's better than doing nothing. Right.
And then we get this like lovely myth of it will stretch. And I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. Oh, really? You think so?
Yeah. I'm like, no, what will happen is the baby's head gets bigger. So their mouth in relationship to the breast has gotten better. We found different compensations that are working for us now. Doesn't mean it fixed the problem. In relationship to that baby's mouth, that baby without any intervention will have this range of motion. This is what they got.
That's right.
And they are stuck with it unless they are doing exercises and there's some sort of impetus that's causing that baby to do some work, or adult. Because it will say it stays the hours.
Yeah. It does. Look, it does. So I remember having a client. This was in 2006, I guess. 2006. I had a desperate naturopathic physician client.
Mm-hmm.
And we had extinguished all the other avenues. And she was like, no one will cut my baby's frenulum. Will you please do it? And I was like, well, you're a naturopathic physician. You could do it. She was like, I'm sorry, I cannot put scissors in my baby's mouth. Can you please do it? I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So I taught myself how to do anterior frenulotomies, which is what you experienced with your first experience of it, which is does not deal with the posterior, does not deal with any of these things, and is sometimes effective on newborns, but frequently the posterior tie prevents any real change. Yeah. Exactly. And so that's I did that for a few years, there's some people who get instant relief from that release, but you
get something.
Generally, I would say 50% of the clients or more, it does not do enough to warrant the process, is what I would say.
Yeah. It doesn't.
And then finally, it feels like maybe It doesn't resolve
So-
the issue, but it doesn't even resolve the breastfeeding problem significantly enough to have warranted the stress and the cry and the whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say about 5, maybe 8 years ago is when I feel like ancillary professionals started finally waking up about this. Pediatric dentists, PT, lactation consultants, ENTs, and eventually slowly a few pediatricians. What do you think caused that change? Like, why have the pediatric dentists, is it just because they can make money off babies, or like, why did they finally decide to join our fight for this?
So that's the thing I hear most frequently from naysayers who like oral function, this is ridiculous. And there's a large percentage of pediatricians, SLPs, and IBCLCs who do not believe this is affecting function at all. And I would challenge them to look at various evidences. And I often hear, when I used to work in the pediatric dentist's office, I had a dad come in and be like, I think y'all are all giving each other kickbacks. And I was like, no, dude, first of all, that's illegal. Second of all, he's like, no, that's how it works in the business world. I'm like, that may be how it works in the business world. But if I, as a lactation consultant, am getting a kickback from a dentist I refer to, like, there are laws against that. I'm not, like, that's not okay. And we're, you know, how like midwives undercharge and we're not fully being paid what we're worth. Lactation consultants often undercharge. They're not being paid enough for the hours that they're working and the amount of effort that they're putting in. It's starting to change, but that's partly economy and inflation, and it's not actually even helping. Dentists, I really do think it's the growing body of evidence, or it's their own personal experiences. Because a lot of the dentists I know in Houston who are doing it, it's because their kid had a tongue tie and no one would freaking do anything about it. I just got into it with a pediatric dentist recently because I'm doing some long distance lactation consulting for another midwife in the state. And this client comes, she's got every single symptom of tongue tie. She's got a baby that's not transferring milk. She's got a baby that's not latching well. She's got a baby that is tearing up her nipples. And this dentist is refusing. And I'm like, they're like, I can't see it. I'm like, then we need more body work, or you need to use a low level laser that's scattered. It's called biolaser or laughter. I promise it's there. And you can have a posterior tie that is under the mucosal layer and you can't visualize it. And this is literally why you're here. So like, I know that sucks as a clinician, being like, shit, I'm going to operate on something I can't visualize. And that does suck. And also I know dentists here in Houston who will be like very upfront, have an informed disclosure conversation with the client and be like, this may not help because it might not be the posterior aspect. It might be tension elsewhere. It might be all these other things, and it might help. But I can't guarantee you this is going to solve your issues. You need to work with lactation. You need to work with body work after this, but I will do the procedure. So I get very frustrated because we still have pediatric dentists who, quote, do tongue tie and aren't fucking doing anything. And these moms are like you said, they're like, well, you know, the dentist says there's not a tongue tie, or my pediatrician says there's not a tongue tie.
Yeah, they don't know how to examine.
Yeah.
Well, this gets us right back to which brings us to the point of this conversation, which is, y'all, we got a course on that. And you can learn with incredibly helpful PDF downloads, videos, audio, incredible written content. Melissa walks you through the entire advanced evaluation of breastfeeding and oral function.
Plug right there.
Plug. Well, we'll leave the link in the show notes. But seriously, people need to learn how to examine this newborn mouth, the oral function. And it's not just the anatomy, it's the physiology too. And that's, it's that physiology piece. It's the functional piece. Because I can absolutely have a baby that doesn't look like, air quotes, they have a tongue tie, but they sure act like it. And 2 weeks in, we're struggling. And this is also, I'm just going to put my little, my structure for postpartums is different than a lot of midwives. You know, you do that 24-hour check-in, you go 48 hours, you don't see them again until 2 weeks, at which point the baby is now not back to birth weight. The mom is sobbing. You know, I don't wait that long. I'm going to see them at day 1 and do a weight
then.
I see them
And I might see them again.
1 and 3 and 7 and 9 and 14. I see them way more too. Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I also feel like postpartum depression and anxiety is on the rise, and I just think we can't leave our moms alone. So that's a whole nother podcast.
I know. It's so frustrating. It's and the other, next level, this is a bigger societal issue with the lack of care for women.
Yes. And lack of acknowledgement of the secondary transformation that they're going through. Yeah. We had a fantastic keynote.
Matrescence.
I know. We had a fantastic keynote at this year's experience. Dr. Sunil Patel, who's a home visiting perinatologist, who talks about the progesterone drop and the crisis in matrescence. Absolutely. Well, Melissa, it's been the pleasure that I knew it would be. You are just such an extraordinary thinker and educator. And I'm so glad that you compiled all of this research in one place so that people can up-level their skills and also have access to you. I just saw one of your comments come through in the chat. So at the end of every section, there's a place to leave comments or ask questions, and Melissa herself answers them. There's a really helpful downloadable PDF to walk you through the whole process. And it's a really worthy course. We can alleviate a whole bunch of suffering and really up-level our postpartum skill with this course. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for hosting it.
If somebody wants to come and chat with you and follow, where would they do that?
You can find me on Instagram at Spiral Path Midwifery. You can find me on Facebook, Spiral Path Midwifery, or you can find my personal page, Melissa Nealy. And my phone number is all over the internet. If you can't get me through those, text me.